They made black women wash dishes at the party, but they didn't know that her millionaire husband owned the mansion. Crystal chandeliers bathed the grand hall in golden light. Waiters glided past with silver trays of champagne, the air thick with perfume, laughter, and the clinking of crystal. It was the kind of party where every guest wore diamonds that caught the light, where tuxedos were pressed so sharp they looked carved from stone, where power itself seemed to mingle among the people. And then, there she was. In the corner, near the marble staircase, stood a woman in a simple navy dress. Angela. Her posture was calm, her presence quiet, almost invisible amid the swirling gowns and polished shoes. She held her clutch close, eyes soft, offering a polite smile to those who brushed by, but no one lingered. No one saw her. In this room full of status and spectacle, she was overlooked, dismissed as someone who didn't belong, until the words cut through the music like a blade. "Excuse me," a sharp voice sneered. Heads turned. A woman in glittering jewels, her glass of champagne poised like a weapon, had stepped directly into Angela's path. Her tone dripped with disdain. "The kitchen's that way. Dishes are piling up." The laughter came instantly. A few gasps, a few whispers, but also smirks from those nearby, the kind that agreed without speaking. Someone chuckled cruelly, muttering, "Well, she does look like the help." Angela's eyes lowered. She said nothing. No anger, no argument, just silence. Her fingers tightened slightly around her clutch, but her face remained composed. The party's hum dulled to an uncomfortable murmur. Some guests shifted uneasily, others sipped their drinks pretending not to notice. The snooty woman smirked, satisfied at her public display of superiority. To her, Angela wasn't a guest, wasn't an equal. She was someone to be dismissed, humiliated, forgotten. But the camera lingered. A heartbeat of silence stretched, drawing the audience into Angela's quiet strength, and then the narrator's voice broke in, low, deliberate, heavy with promise. What none of them knew was that this woman didn't just belong here. She owned it. Shock at injustice, humiliation burning in the audience's chest, and the tease of a reversal so powerful they must see what happens next. Angela moved quietly through the glittering hall, her simple navy dress flowing just enough to be elegant without demanding attention. She wasn't draped in diamonds or designer couture like the women clustered around the champagne fountains. She wasn't wrapped in the sharp arrogance of the men boasting about their investments near the bar. No, Angela carried herself differently, with dignity, with grace, with a humility that made her stand out even as others dismissed her. To the crowd, however, her simplicity meant something else. "She must be staff," one guest whispered, tilting her jeweled bracelet toward Angela as if pointing out an oddity. "Who invited her?" Another muttered behind a glass of wine. "She doesn't fit in here," came the low reply, dripping with judgment. Angela heard them. Of course she did. Years of moving through rooms where her worth was measured by fabric labels and last names had trained her ears to catch those whispers. But she didn't flinch. Instead, she offered small nods of kindness to servers rushing by, even helping one steady a tray about to spill. Her calm was unshakable, her smile soft but steady, an island of quiet in the storm of arrogance around her. And then there was her, Victoria, the self-proclaimed queen of every ballroom she entered. Her presence was impossible to miss. Dressed in glittering silver sequins, diamonds catching every light, she walked with the assurance of someone who believed the room belonged to her. She thrived on being admired, adored, envied. And, more importantly, she thrived on putting others down. From the moment she spotted Angela, Victoria's eyes narrowed with disdain. In her shallow world, wealth was displayed, not hidden. Status was proven by designer labels and sparkling accessories, not quiet dignity. And Angela, in her modest dress and natural grace, was invisible at best, and laughable at worst. "Look at her," Victoria muttered to her circle of friends, her lips curling into a smirk. "Every great party needs a little charity case." Her companions tittered cruelly, eyes sliding toward Angela with mocking amusement. But Angela didn't shrink. She didn't match insult with insult. She simply stood tall, sipping her water, her gaze calm and steady. To the audience, her silence wasn't weakness. It was composure. It was the quiet before a storm, Still, the murmurs spread like wildfire. Guests whispered in corners, throwing side glances filled with judgment. To them, Angela was a mistake at this party, an outsider who somehow slipped past the velvet ropes of high society. They measured her worth by her dress, her jewelry, her silence. They couldn't see what lay beneath, and that was the hook, the injustice planted firmly in the audience's chest. They knew something the guests didn't. They knew the reversal was coming. Viewers burn with frustration watching Angela underestimated, craving the moment when the truth will shatter every smug smile in the room. The party's energy shifted the moment Victoria decided to make her move. Surrounded by her glittering entourage, her wine glass raised like a gavel, she stepped toward Angela with the dramatic poise of someone about to deliver judgment. The music played on, but the conversations around them softened, curiosity pulling ears closer. "Excuse me," Victoria said loudly enough for half the room to hear. Her eyes scanned Angela from head to toe, landing on her simple dress with thinly veiled disgust. "The kitchen's that way. The dishes are piling up." A ripple of laughter moved through the circle of elites, some covering their mouths, others outright smirking. A few guests gasped, the cruelty of the comment hitting harder than Victoria had likely intended, but none spoke up. In this world, silence was complicity, and complicity was safer than standing against the queen bee. Angela didn't move at first. She simply lifted her gaze, meeting Victoria's eyes with a calm so unshakable it was almost unsettling. Then, in a voice quiet but firm, she replied, "I'm a guest here." The words should have been enough. A simple truth. But Victoria recoiled as if Angela had just overstepped some invisible boundary. She let out a sharp laugh, tossing her head back so her diamond earrings caught the light. "Guests," she sneered, her tone dripping with mockery, "wear diamonds. Guests wear gowns. Guests do not walk into a mansion dressed like they just came from a bargain bin. No, sweetheart, you're no guest. You're staff. Don't embarrass yourself." The giggles around her grew louder, crueler. One man even muttered, "Well, she does have the posture of a maid." Another woman whispered, "Whoever invited her must be regretting it now." Angela stood in the center of their ridicule, her calm expression betraying no anger, no humiliation. But the sting of the moment wasn't lost, not on the audience, not on the few kind-hearted staff who looked away in discomfort, and not on the handful of guests who shifted uneasily, unsure how to react. Her silence spoke louder than words. It wasn't the silence of defeat, it was the silence of restraint. Victoria smirked in triumph, believing she had put Angela in her place. She waved a hand dismissively toward the kitchen doors. "Go on now. Don't keep the real staff waiting. There are glasses that need polishing." The room's attention locked on Angela. Would she fight back? Would she storm out? Instead, Angela gave the faintest nod, turned on her heel, and began walking slowly toward the kitchen. Each step was deliberate, her shoulders squared, her pace unhurried. The audience watching could feel it. Her silence wasn't submission. It was something else. A storm building under the surface, a power held back until the right moment. And just before the camera cut to black, the narrator's voice dropped in, quiet but loaded with promise. They thought they'd shamed her into silence. But what they didn't realize was that Angela's silence wasn't a weakness. It was patience. And soon, they'd learn just how costly their mistake would be. The sting of humiliation makes viewers burn for justice. While Angela's deliberate calm creates suspense, audiences must keep watching to see when and how the tables will turn. The kitchen clattered with the sound of rushing water and stacked plates, a sharp contrast to the music and laughter floating in from the ballroom. Angela stood at the sink, sleeves rolled back, her hands moving with quiet precision as she rinsed and polished crystal glasses. The golden glow of the chandeliers barely reached her here. For the guests, she was already forgotten, reduced to exactly what Victoria had declared her to be, staff. But for the viewers, the sight carried weight. A woman of dignity forced into humiliation, not because she lacked power, but because others couldn't see past her modest dress and calm demeanor. Whispers snaked their way into the kitchen as servers came and went, carrying trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. "Why is she washing dishes?" one asked softly. Another shook his head, lowering his voice even further. "She shouldn't be in here." If they only knew. A few staff members exchanged uneasy glances. Some of them recognized her, if not by name, then by presence. They knew the truth. This wasn't just any woman. But still, no one spoke up. The stakes were too high, the guests too powerful. Their silence only deepened the sting. Back in the ballroom, Victoria basked in the attention of her circle. She made no effort to lower her voice, making sure every ear in the room could catch her words. "Can you believe it?" she said, smirking as she sipped her champagne. "People like her should be grateful we even let them in here. Honestly, I did her a favor, gave her something useful to do." The group around her erupted in laughter. Some laughed nervously, others wholeheartedly, but no one dared challenge her cruelty. For Victoria, it was victory. For the viewers, it was gasoline poured on fire. Angela, however, remained calm. She polished another glass until it gleamed, her reflection staring back at her with quiet steadiness. There was no anger in her face, only patience. The sting of the insult was real, but she carried it with grace, not vengeance. And still, the audience watching could feel it. Her silence wasn't surrender. It was the silence before revelation. Meanwhile, the absence of one man loomed larger with every passing moment. David Johnson, Angela's husband, the true owner of the mansion and one of the most successful CEOs in the city, hadn't yet arrived. Guests whispered about his lateness, assuming he'd make some grand entrance befitting his stature. Victoria, smug in her assumed control, joked, "Maybe he's embarrassed too. Who would want to be seen with that?" The arrogance in her tone stung all the more because of what the audience knew and the guests didn't. Each cruel laugh, each dismissive glance stacked the frustration higher. Viewers weren't just watching, they were waiting, hungry for the scales to tip, and then it happened. The music faltered as the grand double doors at the far end of the ballroom swung open. A hush fell instantly over the crowd, every head turning. David had arrived, tall, composed, dressed in a tailored suit that carried authority in every stitch. He stepped into the room with the quiet power of a man who needed no introduction. The guests surged forward to greet him, their voices dripping with flattery. Phones lifted discreetly, eager to capture a glimpse of him. But David wasn't looking at them. His eyes scanned the room, his expression cool, searching for one person. The camera cuts just as his gaze sharpens, settling toward the kitchen. Audience frustration peaks. Tension stretches tight. And the arrival of David promises the justice they've been craving. They must keep watching to see what happens when he learns the truth. The crowd surged toward David the moment he entered, a sea of eager faces and empty compliments. "Mr. Johnson, so good to see you. We were just talking about your latest deal. What an honor to be in your home tonight." Their words buzzed like flies, every guest desperate to be seen, to be remembered. But David barely responded. His presence was commanding, yes, but his eyes weren't on them. He scanned the ballroom with sharp precision, cutting past sequins and tuxedos, past flattery and false smiles. He wasn't looking for attention. He was looking for her. And then, through the swinging doors that led to the kitchen, he saw her, Angela, standing at the sink, sleeves damp, carefully drying a crystal glass. For a split second, his face was unreadable. Then his jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing into steel. The room, still buzzing with greetings, hadn't noticed his shift, but the storm in him was already brewing. Without a word, David strode through the crowd. The music faltered as heads turned, guests whispering, wondering why he wasn't indulging them. The doors swung open again, and silence rippled across the staff as the owner of the mansion entered the kitchen. Angela looked up, calm as ever. Their eyes met. She gave him the faintest smile, a reassurance only he could understand. But David's gaze moved past her, settling coldly on the guests who had followed him to the threshold. His voice, when it came, was sharp enough to cut glass. "Who told my wife to clean?" The words dropped like a stone in water. The room froze. Conversations died mid-sentence, champagne glasses stilled halfway to lips. Guests stared at him, then at Angela, confusion unraveling into dawning horror. Wife? No one spoke. The silence stretched, heavy, suffocating. A few glanced at Victoria, their eyes betraying nervousness. She shifted uncomfortably under the weight of David's stare but forced a brittle laugh, clutching her glass as though it could shield her. "Oh, come now," she said, her tone brittle with false charm. "We thought she was— help. Just a misunderstanding." The air went colder. David's face didn't move, but the anger behind his eyes was unmistakable. The guests felt it, the staff felt it, the audience watching felt it. Victoria's smirk faltered as her own words echoed back to her, revealing the cruelty at their core. Angela, still holding the polished glass in her hand, remained quiet. She didn't need to speak. Her husband's presence spoke enough for both of them, and in that charged silence, the narrator's voice cut through, steady and deliberate. And in that moment, they realized the woman they humiliated wasn't the help. She was the lady of the house. The shock of reversal lands like a thunderclap. Outrage turns to satisfaction, and the audience has to keep watching to see how David handles the people who dared to humiliate his wife. David stepped forward, his shoes clicking against the marble with the weight of finality. For a moment, the crowd held its breath, unsure whether to follow or scatter. Then, with deliberate calm, he reached for Angela's hand. She let him take it, her posture still graceful, her composure untouched despite the humiliation she had endured only minutes earlier. He turned to face the sea of faces, the jewels, the tuxedos, the people who had whispered and laughed. His voice, firm but measured, rang across the hall. "Meet my wife," he said. He paused, letting the words settle, letting the truth sting. The true owner of this mansion. The room erupted in gasps. Guests exchanged stunned glances, whispers hissing like sparks in dry grass. "His wife?" One woman stuttered, nearly spilling her champagne. "We made her wash dishes," another muttered, face paling as realization struck. Angela didn't gloat. She didn't need to. She simply stood beside her husband, her quiet dignity now undeniable, her very presence proof of how wrong they had been. David's gaze swept the room, his tone cold but steady. "Hospitality," he said, "is not about wealth. It is not about status. It is about respect. And what I just witnessed tonight shames this house." The weight of his words pressed down on every guest. The clinking of glasses ceased, the music was forgotten. The glitter of diamonds suddenly felt cheap under the piercing truth of his condemnation. Victoria, standing stiff in her sequined gown, tried desperately to regain control. She forced a laugh, brittle and hollow. "Oh, Mr. Johnson, you're misunderstanding. It was just a joke. We didn't mean anything by it. Surely, you know—" "Enough." David's interruption was sharp, slicing her words clean in half. His eyes locked on hers unflinching. "Is dignity a joke to you? Do you think prejudice is part of our menu?" Her mouth opened, then closed, the bravado draining from her face. She looked around for allies, but the very guests who had laughed with her now averted their eyes, unwilling to share in her downfall. David's voice carried again, this time colder, final. "Prejudice is not welcome at my table. Not in this house. Not ever." The words echoed like a gavel striking down. The silence that followed was absolute. Angela squeezed his hand gently, grounding him, but she did not stop what came next. David raised his chin slightly, eyes flicking toward the staff who had watched silently from the edges. His voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Escort her out." Gasps rippled again, sharper this time. Victoria's face drained of color, her confidence crumbling as the staff began to move toward her. She sputtered, "You can't be serious. You can't. This is humiliating." But her protests only fed the moment. Every guest watched, every camera phone lifted discreetly, every eye hungry for justice. As the staff closed in, the narrator's voice entered with cool finality. The woman who thought she ruled the party was about to learn. In this house, cruelty had no throne. The tables have turned dramatically. Audience satisfaction soars as Victoria's downfall begins, but the cliffhanger leaves them eager to see exactly how justice will be delivered. The hush in the ballroom was broken only by the shuffle of polished shoes as two members of staff moved toward Victoria. She stiffened, clutching her sequined clutch like a shield, her jeweled bracelets clinking as she raised her hands in protest. "You can't be serious," she cried, her voice shrill and cracking. "This is humiliating. You'll regret this." But David didn't flinch. His eyes followed her with a steady calm that spoke louder than any outburst. Angela remained by his side, her posture graceful, her silence more powerful than any rebuttal. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the guests as the staff gently but firmly took hold of Victoria's arms. She tried to pull away, but her struggles only added to the spectacle. A sea of camera phones rose discreetly, lenses capturing every second of her downfall. Some guests leaned in closer, eager to immortalize the moment that the Queen of Cruelty was dethroned. Victoria's voice cracked into desperation as she was led toward the door. "I didn't mean anything. It was just a joke. Everyone knows I was joking." But the crowd's reaction told another story. Heads shook, eyebrows furrowed. Even her so-called friends who had once giggled at her side turned their backs, unwilling to be tied to her humiliation. As the heavy double doors closed behind her, the silence in the room lingered like a shadow. And then, slowly, quietly, it broke. A smattering of applause began at the far side of the room. Hesitant at first, then stronger, until it swelled into a thunderous ovation. It wasn't for Victoria's exit. It was for Angela. Phones lit up with captions already racing to the internet. "Millionaire humbles racist socialite at his own mansion." The lady they mocked turned out to be the true queen. Within minutes, snippets of the scene would flood TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. Victoria's name would trend not for her wealth, but for her disgrace. David raised a hand, and the applause softened. He stood tall, his arm still linked with Angela's, his voice carrying to every corner of the glittering hall. "Tonight," he began, "was supposed to be a celebration, a gathering of friends and colleagues, but instead, I witnessed something that should never happen in this house, or any house." His gaze swept across the crowd, and more than a few guests lowered their eyes in shame. He looked to Angela, then back to the crowd. Hospitality is not about diamonds or champagne. It is not about status or clothing. True hospitality, true wealth, is about respect. And tonight, my wife demonstrated more dignity in silence than some of you did with all your words. Angela's cheeks flushed, but she held her head high. The room fell into an almost reverent stillness, as if everyone was hanging on David's every syllable. He continued, voice firm but measured. "You measured her by the simplicity of her dress, by the quietness of her presence. You underestimated her because she did not flaunt what she has. But you forgot, true worth cannot be measured by labels or jewels. True worth is measured by character. And tonight, you all saw who truly carried it." The words hung in the air, heavy, undeniable. A roar of applause followed, this time without hesitation, this time genuine. Guests stood clapping, some with tears in their eyes. Servers joined in, relief washing over their faces. The music shifted from tense silence to something warm, celebratory. The party had transformed, not into a display of wealth, but into a testament to grace. Angela, ever composed, offered a gentle smile and bowed her head slightly in gratitude. She didn't seek the spotlight, but tonight it belonged to her anyway. And then came the irony that the audience craved. Guests who had whispered earlier, "She doesn't fit in here," now lined up, eager to apologize. One woman, face flushed with shame, stammered, "Mrs. Johnson, I had no idea." Another man, once snickering with Victoria, bowed his head. "Forgive me, I was wrong." Angela received them all with the same quiet dignity. She didn't gloat, didn't scold, didn't throw their cruelty back in their faces. She simply accepted their apologies with a grace that made their earlier arrogance look all the smaller. Meanwhile, the cameras kept rolling. Clips of guests groveling spread almost as fast as Victoria's exit. Hashtags exploded. Respect, a wealth, a lady, of the house, a Angela Johnson. Across the world, people who had never stepped foot in that mansion would see her not as a victim, but as a symbol, a reminder that power isn't in what you wear or flaunt. It's in how you carry yourself when others try to diminish you. By the time the party resumed, it no longer felt like a gala for elites. It felt like a turning point. The chandeliers still sparkled, the champagne still flowed, but the atmosphere was different. Guests approached Angela with genuine warmth, not forced flattery. Conversations carried a humility that hadn't been there before, and through it all, Angela remained the same, quiet, graceful, steady. She hadn't needed to prove herself. The truth had proven itself for her. The camera lingered on the closed doors where Victoria had been escorted out, then panned back to Angela smiling softly beside David as the narrator's voice cut in. Justice has been served. But Angela's story wasn't over. Because sometimes the greatest revenge isn't humiliation, it's transformation. The justice arc lands with cathartic force, giving viewers the payoff they crave while setting the stage for the lasting aftermath. Weeks passed, but the echoes of that unforgettable night never left the city's memory. What began as a humiliating attempt to belittle one woman had grown into a story whispered across dinner tables, splashed across headlines, and debated in boardrooms. Angela Johnson was no longer just a name. She had become a symbol. The mansion, once the stage for mockery, now wore a different face. Its towering gates bore a new banner stretched proudly across the front. The Angela Johnson Foundation, empowering women, restoring dignity. The charity's mission was simple yet profound: to uplift underprivileged women, to provide resources, education, and opportunities so that no woman would ever again feel invisible in a room full of power. At the grand launch of the foundation, Angela stood beside David, her posture as modest and composed as always. Cameras flashed, reporters clamored for sound bites, but she spoke with the same quiet grace she had carried on the night of the party. "Respect," she said into the microphones. Her voice calm but unwavering, "is not a privilege reserved for the wealthy. It is a right owed to every human being. And dignity," she added, pausing just long enough for her words to sink in, "does not come from what you wear or how you look. Dignity comes from within, and it can never be stripped away, only surrendered. Tonight, we build a future where women never have to surrender it again." The applause that followed wasn't shallow, wasn't polite, it was thunderous, heartfelt. Tears streamed down the cheeks of women in the audience. Some of them once ignored or underestimated themselves. Angela had transformed her humiliation into a mission larger than herself, turning pain into power, scorn into purpose. Across the street from the mansion, a massive billboard was unveiled the same week. Against a stark black background, the image of Angela's silhouette radiated dignity. She stood tall, head slightly bowed but powerful nonetheless. The bold words beneath her figure read, "Respect has no price tag. Dignity has no dress code." The city stopped to stare. Commuters photographed it, teenagers posted it online, and within days it became a mantra repeated around the world. Hashtags flooded timelines, echoing the same truth. Respect has no price tag. But while Angela's influence soared, Victoria's world collapsed. The tabloids were merciless. Pictures of her being escorted out of the mansion replayed on social media like a viral meme. Headlines screamed, "From diamonds to disgrace, Victoria banished from high society." Invitations to exclusive galas dried up overnight. Fashion houses that once begged her to wear their gowns quietly cut ties. The same crowd that once worshipped her presence now whispered behind her back, their admiration replaced by ridicule. She was spotted weeks later by paparazzi. Exiting a cafe alone, her once flawless image cracked. The headline was brutal. Once queen of the ballroom, now a ghost at the table. Her face told the story. Anger, bitterness, regret. But the world had already moved on, and in that contrast lay the final poetic irony. The woman who had defined herself by glittering gowns and cruel words was now irrelevant, while the woman she mocked for her simplicity had become the face of dignity itself. The camera, in the mind's eye, pulls back from Victoria's faded image and returns once more to Angela. Standing proudly before the mansion she now shared with the world, her charity alive, her message unstoppable, and then, the narrator's voice cut in, low and deliberate. The weight of the story distilled into a single truth. Never mistake simplicity for weakness. Because sometimes, the woman you dismiss holds the keys to the very house you're standing in. The screen faded to black. But not before one final message appeared. Direct, personal, and impossible to ignore. Have you ever been underestimated only to prove everyone wrong? Share your story below, and subscribe for more inspiring real-life stories. Inspirational closure. Poetic justice and an empowering call to action leave the audience not just satisfied, but compelled to comment, share, and carry the message forward.